they did. The thing I find really scary about sequels and prequels is it's like the Lost problem, right? The TV show Lost. Like, you've put some of it out there already. You don't have the opportunity to go and be like, oh, that polar bear shouldn't have been there. Let's edit it out. It's like we're stuck with the polar bear.
Absolutely.
And so, yeah, and so you're kind of painting inside, you're coloring inside the lines at that.
Hey, it's Writers Row, where we talk about the writing community on Twitter. We talk about the business side of writing and the creative side. I am DC Wright-Hammer, the Between Two Minds author, science fiction thriller writer. And I'm joined
owner of a cat.
Right. Joined as always by the other host.
That it always screws up DC's well-planned out ideas. My name's David Gane. I'm the co-writer of the Shepherd and Wolf mystery series about two teenage boys who chase serial killers. Yay. And who else do we have with us in the other box or corner? You are?
Me! I'm the
Yeah!
Hi, I'm Drew Melbourne. I'm the author of Percival Gint and the Conspiracy of Days, a science fiction, fantasy, comedy, adventure, horror novel that you can buy at Amazon and other reputable or disreputable online locations, as well as some other stuff that we might talk about during the show.
Do you have any other genres you could stick into that book?
I've really tried. There's no hardcore erotica. I'm sorry.
Okay. That's next book.
What I say to people is there's the famous expression about kill all your darlings. That's like if you've got an idea but it doesn't fit in your novel, you should get rid of it. And I say no. So. You
have an anthology of darlings.
Yeah.
Okay. But it's a cohesive story.
Somewhere I described it as instead of killing them, you put all your darlings in a blender and make a smoothie of them, which would probably also kill them. So, 50-50.
Got it.
But they're tastier.
Yes.
Okay, so do you want to do your little spiel about commenting and liking there, DC?
Yes. So we appreciate everybody who watches Writers Row. Make sure to subscribe. The more subscribers we get, the more enthusiastic we are. We're already enthusiastic. We could be even more enthusiastic, so please subscribe. Give us some thumbs up. Definitely comment down below on the things you like. If you want to harass us in the comments, just don't go too far with it. But we appreciate those comments. So, so there you go.
Okay, so what are we talking about this week?
So we wanted to bring Drew on. We want to talk about sequels and prequels, the process of going from you got to have a book or you got to have something released in order to be able to write a prequel or a sequel to it. And we just want to talk through that. So if there are writers in the writing community watching this and they've got one book out and they want it to be a series of some kind and they're ready to write either a sequel or eventually they want to get around to writing a prequel and whatnot. We just want to talk about the ins and the outs of that. I know you've written several books, David, that are sequels. I've written a sequel, but it's really a sequel and a prequel in one, so we'll talk about that. And Drew, I know you had some things to bring to the table with that as well, so I wanted to just dig into that.
First of all, I have to say I was totally misunderstanding. I thought we were just going to be talking about the Star Wars sequels and prequels. So I did not prepare for this at all. So I'm just going to have to wing it, I guess.
How is that different than any other episode, David?
Well, I don't have my notes this time. So this spontaneity actually is really well planned. So.
Great.
Okay, so let's just kind of go through. You have two, right, DC? A sequel, prequel, and kind of an in-between for one of them, right?
So, well, I mean, it depends on how you look at my books because they're both interleaved narratives. And for people who don't know what interleaved means, I tell two stories at the same time and I bring them together by the end of the book, sort of like a zipper approach, zippering up the story together. And in both books, I've got things that happen in the past and things that happen in the present.
So it's like an interqueel or something.
I have no idea what that is.
I'm just trying to, what is the thing where both of them are really just stacked on top of each other?
Um, it is my brand of writing. That's all I could tell you.
Drew's like, why did I agree to this?
Oh, learning words. I'm learning interqueal and interleaved. I know words now. This is great.
The problem is he made up his word. That's not a real word.
Oh, it's totally a thing in Canada, I'm sure.
Okay, well, that's where
skills, and then there's something between them in Canada, right?
Okay.
And then there's also, don't forget, you're going to have to change the spelling on that as well. So
I don't know what this is supposed to begin with. So
okay, and then Drew, how many books do you have that are sequels, prequels, and interqueels?
Yeah. So my first prose novel is the book that came out last year, and so that was intended to be a self-contained book, and partially because my other big writing credit. So back in the day, I did a graphic novel in like the mid-aughts called Arch Enemies that was originally supposed to kick off. It was supposed to be like the first in a series of graphic novels, and because the comic industry is what it is, I got one, and then it sort of ends abruptly. And I said, no sequels. I'm going to write something self-contained. It'll be a book. I don't have to collaborate with anyone. It'll be nice. And then by the time I got to the end of it, like for folks who've read the book, it both sets up very explicitly in a James Bond will return to in sort of way. It sets up the sequel, and the last page like teases what'll be my next book, which is a sort of a prequel short story collection. Yeah, I went from being very hard and fast. I'm just going to do a standalone book. I'll be done. People will be able to pick it up and enjoy it. It'll be fine. To completely just kind of. So I'm excited about this conversation because you guys you've done your sequels, you've done your queel thing. And so I'm excited to hear from you guys, your experience and so forth. As I'm kind of finishing up. I'm in the home stretch of putting together the collection for probably early next year, and then I've got the sequel to come after that. So what's worked for you, what hasn't worked for you, the pitfalls and so forth are things I'm interested in.
Oh, I like that part of the discussion.
Yeah,
really a lot, because the big thing that we found was, so we have 3 books now, we have 2 more coming, and it's been proceeding all connected, but you can read them separate, but they fall in line with each other, and keeping track of the timeline and all the different characters that we've mentioned throughout the books has become the biggest juggling act. I ended up getting, I forget what it's called. It's like timeline software for the Mac, and what it was to do was just to figure out what events, what things do we say in the books that occur, or people that are mentioned or anything like that, and then putting that on a timeline, and then seeing if it actually makes sense, because suddenly you realize, oh, this actually happened 20 years ago, and this thing couldn't have happened then, and we were lucky. We only have one minor plot hole that no one has ever figured out or noticed, so that is kind of nice. But it was because you write a scene where it's like, I'm just trying to think, like a scene where somebody looks at a picture and says, oh yeah, that was my mom's mom, and that's in front of the old house when she was a child, or whatever kind of thing, right? And you'd say it in passing. You don't really think of it. It's more about the scene between the other characters going on. And then suddenly now you've set this stake in the ground that now that is a part of the timeline and the part of the history. And then you realize, oh, wait, I got to make that actually fit into the rest of the thing. And yeah, it's I would say the first thing I would do is start tracking not only what happens in your books, like the plot events, but the things that are mentioned in the background, because those are the things that will come and bite you in the ass when you're not even thinking about it. And then it does pay off later, because then you can mine it for other story points. And or on the software that I'm using, I can actually see, oh, this happened for this character, and this other character was at this point in their life. So it can kind of track all the different times and places that all the characters are. And it's been helpful and terrifying all in the same breath. So,
Yeah.
how about you, DC? Did you have the same problem?
So what I did is, since I was writing past and present in my first book, and I kind of did that with the second book as well, I cheated. I did not specify a lot of times. I did not give like hard years. I didn't even, like, to this day, when I talk to different readers, they'll tell me like, oh, this must take place 100 years in the future. Or others are like, oh, it's probably only like 20 or 30 years in the future. And so I kind of did that on purpose, partly because, I think, yeah, if I got a huge reader base and they started pouring through, would they find some inconsistencies? Maybe. I haven't found any. My editor didn't find any. It flows. I think the thing you have to do is you have to know your characters. Like, you kind of have to know as you're developing them. And so as you do, like, and it's funny that you say you have these little things about your character, David, that you don't remember, but you're also the one that says that plot development and character development are the same thing. And so why would you have these little tangents if they weren't important? Side note, that's just a little side note I wanted to put in there. I do that too, though. And what I found is the reference points, like you were saying. And so as I get to the next point where this character is going to do something different, you've got this whole list of things they've done in the past that would basically tell you what they should do next. I'll give an example. In my first book, one of the characters is obsessed with dogs. And then, like, I was writing and I changed something in the story, and instead of dogs, at the end they had this weird story about this rare lion that attacked people or something like that. My editor is like, where the hell did that story come from? And I'm like, I don't know, it just sounded compelling. She's like, no, get rid of that. And instead of getting rid of it, I changed the lion to a wolf, and I told the story anyway, because that's the character was obsessed with dogs. And so I actually was able to spin this random story I was telling in the book to actually fit the character. The story that they were telling about this animal actually was important to their character development, about who they are and the decisions they make and things like that. And so I originally had it as a lion. I switched it to a wolf, and I thought it worked well. The editor's like, this is fine now. Like, okay, I get why you did what you did here, and this will work. But I think that's important. As you're building characters, you need to know who they are throughout a series. If you're writing a sequel, use that. That's your toolbox for those characters. If you're writing a prequel, you've got to sort of build that toolbox of how they came to be. And so I've done that too. Why is this character disjointed? Why is this character evil? Why is this character good? Whatever it might be. If you're doing the prequel, you're filling that toolbox basically of the things, that came to fruition already. So, I don't know.
What
that was
about you? I know. What about you, Drew? When you're doing a bunch of short stories that are all mixed up, that must make it even more complicated.
Yeah. I mean, so two things. One, three things. One, I want to get back to later. I've only read the first Shepherd and Wolf mystery, and there are so many chapters, people. If you have not read his book yet, it was like a war between, I was reading on the Kindle, so it was giving me like the percent complete, and it was like a war between like the percent complete and the chapter number, right? Like, so it's like chapter 47, percent 46, and then like one would overtake the other. But but one of them clearly wins. It's not the one you would imagine. Um, sorry. So
That's great. That's great.
the thing I was gonna say. So the thing. What I want to get back to. You mentioned that you have plans for 5, and so I'm very curious about kind of how you settled that on that number, like how much that's structured out and so forth.
Okay, we'll come to that.
Yeah. To the thing you were saying though about timeline, about planning things out. I found even in the first novel, because it has a little bit of an epic sweep to it. Like there's a lot of like historical events that kind of tie together to form the backstory, and then there's a lot of one of the big themes is the past kind of coming and how it influences the present. And so I found just in like a stupid Excel spreadsheet, I was doing a lot of that in the first novel. The advantage I had there was I was still writing the novel at the time, so if like things didn't line up, I would just edit the novel until they did. The thing I find really scary about sequels and prequels is it's like the Lost problem, right? The TV show Lost. Like you've put some of it out there already. You don't have the opportunity to go and be like, oh, that polar bear shouldn't have been there. Let's edit it out. It's like we're stuck with the polar bear.
Absolutely.
And so you're kind of painting inside, you're coloring inside the lines at that point. And so specifically with the short stories, one of the things that's been interesting is I have not been writing them in chronological order. I was actually mostly kind of working backwards, which was helpful because I knew where the character needed to wind up. And then I was kind of then working my way back to him in his sort of, I don't know, larval stage. Not literally, it's not that kind of a book. But the funny thing, like my wife would read these stories as I've written them, and she's like, this character is, he was much more likable in the novel than here. And it's like, don't worry, he'll get there. It's like, it's evolution. And so that's been really fun and a little bit scary is to try to weave all those moments together, because it was one thing, like I started out, it was just sort of the idea was I would do these short stories, and I was just going to do one at first and throw it up online and be like a promotional thing. I kind of had in my head like, oh, maybe there's a way to put it up on Amazon for free, and like there's not really a good way to do that. So it's like, oh, well, maybe I'll do more of them and then throw them together as like a short thing. And then it sort of, as I started kind of sketching it out, it snowballed a little bit, but really it just sort of filled out. And I was like, oh, well, this is interesting because it's a series of short stories, but it's sort of following this character over time. So in one way, it's very much like how, like with Sherlock Holmes novels, or Sherlock Holmes books, right? You've got your combination of here's a novel, here's a collection of short stories, but it also it sort of tracks this character development. So it for folks who have been bugging me because they read the first book and they want more, it's almost a novel, but in some ways it has certain advantages over it, right? Because they're these shorter, discrete pieces. There are things I can do. I can be like a little punchier. As I was saying to somebody on Twitter, I think last week, like one of the 9th story that I've written in the of I think it'll wind up being 10 total in the book. The 9th one is mostly people sitting around playing cards. And as a chapter in a book, it would be a weird choice. As a standalone short story, just sort of out there in the wild, I don't know that it would make sense. But like the way that the book is structured, it sort of I think it's an interesting set of character beats and a change of pace that contrasts with the other stories. I think it'll be fun and funny and interesting, or not, but I'll let other people review it.
I really like the idea of, and I never thought of it until you said it, that you can change tonally between each of those short stories, right? Yeah. And kind of explore different genres or whatever you wanted to as you go. So that's cool too. Yeah, I really like that. With regards to the reason why we chose 5 books, excuse me, my soda water is getting to me. We originally started with the first book, and then we kind of planned on just writing a bunch of books. And after the first one, I was like, this is exhausting. I need to kind of have an endpoint and move towards something. Also, I was also playing with that fear of, having just keep writing and writing and writing and then being stuck in that world and not writing anything else. I knew I had other different stories and different genres I wanted to explore. So that was where I also was like, okay, let's do an endpoint, see if we can get to the end of that and then go from there. So after the first book was done, we had a couple of people asking around the same question over and over again, about basically what one of the stories is of one of our characters. And so we just sat down and had a discussion about it and said, okay, what is that story, and defined it. And ever since then, we've now been writing, each book is its own mystery, its own, it's a standalone. You shouldn't need to read another book without two things. You don't need to read another book, so you can just read it as is without needing extra information. But then on the flip side of that, we also hide as much as we can about the other books, so you're not spoiling what's coming and everything like that. Although I think the fourth book, we just kind of have to accept the loss that you're going to have to have read some other stuff, because it's getting, we're trying to answer the big question that we asked ourselves after book one. So now we kind of need to answer that and fill in those other questions. So why did we pick 5 books? I think it just felt like a good number. And then we fleshed out, what do we think are going to be the things that are going to be revealed in each book? What is the end point? And we know the end point. We know the last sentence of the final book. And so now it's just working towards that. And like I said, book 4 is like, we give away a bunch of our secrets finally, which is really nice, because we've been holding on to these secrets for 4 or 5 years, and it's just the two of us knowing it, and it's kind of annoying. Yep. Because we've occasionally let it slip in the wrong place at the wrong time. So yeah, that was the plan. But yeah, once we knew what the end point was, then we could shape everything else around that direction. So, and everything is still loose and flexible. We knew what the major mystery was, but building around that has changed. We've discovered new things about our characters in book 4 that we didn't know before. And then book 5, we had to flesh out a bunch of stuff before we even have started writing it, just so that we knew what was going on in book 4 exactly. So, yeah.
And did you have that plan even from before you started writing book 1? The larger outline?
No, we didn't have anything. It was really just going to be the 2 teenage boys chasing serial killers. And then, yeah, everyone was asking about Charlie.
Yeah.
And then we just said, yeah, let's figure it out. Let's answer the question about who he is and why he is the way he is. And it's been fun, because every book is, how much do we give away? How much do we hint towards it? And knowing where he comes from and the thing that drives him has been interesting as well. Even just making the choices that he makes at times and stuff like that. So, yeah.
Well, no one cares about Tony. That's all.
Pardon me?
Poor Tony.
Strangely enough, the one thing that we've discovered in it is, just for those who don't know it, it's about Tony Shepard, who's like an all-star basketball player, and his girlfriend goes missing, and then he asks the help of this like troublemaker, Charlie Wolf, to come along and help him out trying to find his girlfriend. And as the series has gone on, we've slowly needed Tony to learn and get better and smarter and develop, because he can't always be like, oh, I don't know what to do in this situation. Charlie, what do you need me to do here?
Yeah.
So doing that, also figuring out who drives the mystery in every book, we've shifted that. You know, one of them brings it to the other and says, oh, I want to do this thing and do that. And that's paid off really, really well over the series. So little things like that have really helped kind of shape it. But the big thing is that you're in this very limited world, this limited vocabulary, and you just, as a writer, I think, don't want to just be stuck in that one place, and you want to develop and grow. So that's the one thing I am looking forward to. And I like the idea of having a end point, right? Like all five books, you will have a full story right to the end, and hopefully we deliver it all. we don't bail on the final season and make DC all angry at us.
I've only read the first one, and what your series kind of reminds me of, and I haven't read the next ones yet, obviously, but what Dan Brown does with the Robert Langdon series is, you know, starting with Angels and Demons and then the Da Vinci Code and on, like he'll just give a nod to the previous book, like literally probably maybe 5 or 10 sentences total throughout the whole next book will he acknowledge anything in the previous books. But otherwise it's, let's drop the character in, let's give him this new situation, and let's have him figure it out. And so I think you said you've done that through the first 3. The fourth one, you kind of got to start bringing some things back together, because you're sort of hitting the crescendo of the series. And so that makes sense in a longer series. And as you start to wrap things up, you do want to do some recalling. You want to, there's these loose ends that we need to mention. And so with my series, the Between Two Minds series, I knew I was thinking 3 books, and then I wrote book 1. Book 2 was a lot of like editing scraps from book 1. Like I had all this world building and background and things I wanted to do in the first book, but I really couldn't. So that became book 2. I introduced some main characters, and I couldn't give them as much background as I wanted to. So I do want to go back and write a prequel to fill in. It's going to be relevant to the second book, basically, because that's where I introduced the main character, but it's going to be relevant to technically the 4th book in the series, because while you can read it, it's going to be a prequel, a straight prequel, and we have to find ways to finagle it to make it work. But it's going to set up the 4th book in the series. So it's like, can it be read first? Does it have to be read third? Like, these are some questions I still have to figure out because we're currently writing it. And when I say we, I had mentioned in earlier episodes that I have taken on a co-writer for it, which still hasn't been revealed. But the whole thing about my series is it's between two minds. So I really wanted, he does know, but it hasn't been revealed yet. Between two minds. So I did want, 2 different writers to write it. I wanted to be relatively cohesive, but I also wanted different writing styles. I wanted there to be some distinction there. So that's going to set up I'm going to write that. Then book 4 is going to take the main story forward, but it's also going to be a prequel and a sequel. This is sort of my theme, bringing the past and present together and moving the whole thing forward, that the past is always relevant to the present, and it's going to help drive the future. I know how book 4 ends, and I know how what's left of the series needs to end. I don't have everything in mind for what I'm going to need to do for technically book 5 in the series. There's not a ton left. There's a lot of pieces I have to pick up. It's not necessarily clear to me. And I was worrying about that a lot as I've been writing this prequel, and I have started writing book 4. But I'm just going to get through them and see where it lies. Like, I think when you're writing, you're like, oh, I have these ideas. I know where I want the series to go. How do I get there? But you just need to really take that next step. You need to take the next step, the next step, the next step, and you will eventually get there. It might not be exactly where you thought you'd be, and it's definitely usually not how you thought you'd get there. But that's what you need to do. Worry about what's in front of you when you're in a series, not worrying about what's 10 steps ahead or 50 steps ahead or something like that.
How about you, Drew? Are you finding that you worry about the connections between all the books? And could you, like you said, the sitting around one is not going to be one that can just go out into the world and be understood, but
yeah,
could you pretty well hand out most of these short stories? And
yeah. I mean, I think one of the interesting things, so I have one story left to finish, the last one that's sort of been my bugbear all year. I mentioned it a little bit on Twitter. It's actually going to be in for copyright purposes, I will say, not a choose your own adventure, but it's going to be a choose your own adventure. So lawyers don't watch this, right? I think it's fine.
No.
So
except we're going to have one on next week, but anyway.
Great. So that one's been a little bit of a challenge to put together, but yeah. So for the most part, in the initial writing, for a while I was hosting some of them on my website, and I took them down because I'm getting closer to publication date, and I don't want to compete with myself, but they were originally written basically to be just, you can read them in any order, either before or after the novel, which is challenging too. They all take place chronologically before the novel, but there are things in the novel that are like revelations about the main character that are, like things from his childhood that I don't necessarily want to spoil in this book. So figuring out a way that in their current version, those stories can all be read in whatever order. The novel can be read in whatever order. As I edit everything together, part of what I'm going to be looking to do is I'm going to do a little bit of trimming, because the stories they're going to fall in chronological order at that point. So there'll be things like I'll pull out of the original version of the story that I did, where there can be a couple of places where I reintroduce the same character over the course of a couple different stories, and so I'll be kind of massaging that, so it's not quite as repetitious. And doing things like for recurring characters, making sure that the earliest story is where you get the best introduction to them, and so forth. But yeah, the big challenge is to write the entire book, to have it all set up, and then to be able to say to someone, if you read the novel, you can read this next, or if you haven't read the novel and you want to read this first and get like kind of get your toe wet and get a sense of the universe, you can do that and go on to whatever that cat is doing.
She's super excited for your prequel. She's going to be ordering it on Amazon as soon as it's available. So
I'm lucky because I've got a good half hour before my cat comes looking for dry food. So I think okay. Skate by you.
There you go.
Why did you lock your animals in rooms?
Are you talking to me?
All of you.
What? Really? You're going to have PETA come and attack this video because you're talking about locking animals in rooms. And that will be the downfall.
Loving family member who will hang out with them.
No, they get to roam free. This Writer's Row is also Cat's Row. I don't know if you knew that, but it totally is. So.
Okay, so I guess the flip side is I lock myself in a room, and then the cat gets the rest of the house.
Okay. And that's okay, actually. That is within animal rights to lock yourself in a room. So there you go. Okay. And on that note, I think we'll call it an episode. Before we break, we want to definitely we work hard. We're all authors, and we want to be able to promote ourselves. So, Drew, you get to go first because you're the honorary guest. So go ahead and promote whatever you would like.
Sure. Let me see. Over here, I have my novel Between Two Minds. Wait, this is not mine. Sorry.
Oh!
Spoiler alert.
Sorry. My sequel is going to have the same cover as DC's.
That's copywritten. Don't do it.
Oh, that was mine. I was going to use that for book 4.
Just switch the eyes. Switch the eyes. Anyway.
Yeah, so Personal Git and Conspiracy of Days, available now in softcover and ebook. It is not all about people sitting around and playing cards. So if you enjoy things like Doctor Who, Hitchhiker's Guide, Good Omens, it's that sort of mix of comedy and serious and cosmic, fantasy, magic, sci-fi, all that great stuff. I think, if you guys don't mind, I can do a title reveal. The book that is coming, my prequel short story collection to Personal Git, is going to be coming early next year. And I wanted to come up with a longer title, and I have mathematically done that. So it is Personal Git and the Inevitability of Fire and Other Cases, coming in 2020.
Okay. Hey, big reveal on Retro. I appreciate that. The title's actually longer than the book, right? So
yes.
Okay, great.
It's going to be the title versus chapter numbers versus
and
completion.
You're not going to know who wins because it's not the one you think. So appreciate it, Drew. That's going to go. We got a big title reveal on Writers Row. We appreciate that. So.
You just gave him his title for this.
Yep. So I'm going to name the YouTube video that. So
title reveal.
No, the name of his book. No.
All
right. David, what do you got for us?
I'm going to promote
Look at you.
These colorful books. And they're my readers' copies, like the ones I have to look at. So they're all the old ones. So Along Comes a Wolf, Shepherd's Watch, Wolf in Shepherd's Clothing, currently nominated at the High Plains Book Awards. And my book 4 is going to be called Shepherd's Call. So that's what I'm going to say. I think I've already revealed it, so it's no big surprise there. So, but yeah, book 4 is Shepherd's Call.
But where can they get those books, David?
Oh, you could buy them on Amazon or at kunyosandgane.com. COUNIOS and Gane, GANE.com.
Got it.
It's fantastic. Also, you can buy a couple of other writers' books on kunyosandgane.com. And I think we still have some t-shirts and stickers available, which are limited. I don't think we're doing a reprint. So if you want them, you got to get them now. But we only have limited sizes. So
yep.
Good luck.
We'll have that link down in the description down below. And Between Two Minds, Awakening, book 1 in the series. And Drew totally stole my thunder. Gosh, why do you got to have copies of my book? And thank you. Book 2 available on Wright-Hammer.com as well as Amazon.com. So definitely check that out. Actually, on Wright-Hammer.com, you can get $5 off your first purchase with promo code Carter, which is the last name of the main character in the book. So I will put that in a link.
I was going to ask when somebody was going to bring that up. You've been saying it for all this time, and no one's ever asked.
That's okay. We'll get through it, David.
I'm going to take a grudge on that one. Have a grudge? Own a grudge?
Right.
I'll purchase one at Wright-Hammer.com.
I think you need to interqueel the grudge. I think.
Yeah, it's an interquel.
Interquel, yeah, that's an interquel. Yeah, that's good.
Okay. All right, and we're going to end the show now. So thanks, everyone, for watching. Thanks, Drew, for coming on. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Drew.
We'll see you guys next time. Take care.